maybe madrasas possibly need to be banned because they're being taught from a young age, children from a young age, how to behead. I mean, like you were saying initially, if we had guns to use for defense, most Hindus would not be comfortable using a gun. We don't kill, we respect life. Whereas, we have those in our society from a young age who are taught to kill. And we've witnessed it. It's not just talk.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, i.e., at a young age. You see, there is a bit of clarity that our community, and in fact, not just the Bharatiya community, the global community, needs to achieve in order to be able to deal with this issue. As long as there's confusion, as long as you don't see the factors which are at play clearly, you can't find a solution. And it's almost as though everybody is struggling to find that solution. Here is a thought. If we get rid of the identitarian politics, get rid of the tribal names and everything else, let's dig deeper than that. In our tradition, we're taught to look beyond Naam and Roop, beyond name and form, and to look at the tattva, the essence of a problem. And the essence of this is that we're dealing with dogmas.
Mm.
Now, the thing about a dogma is that it's an assertion, it's a statement, it's not evidenced, it's not borne out by reason, it just is a statement. And it can be irrational, it can be unproven, but it's a statement that people refuse to abandon. That's what a dogma is. Now, those who study logic and reasoning, there is a fundamental rule, and that is that any dogma which is unproven does not need to be disproved. There is no proof for it, and so you don't need to disprove it. You need to recognize it as a dogma. Now, reasonable people will forever struggle to try and understand a dogma. This is the nature of reasonable people. And so they are forever trying to make a square peg fit into a round hole, and it will never happen. So the first step is we recognize when a dogma is at play, and then the question is this dogma illegal? Does it put forward illegal solutions, illegal penalties, illegal activities? Does it promote those? And if it is, then the dogma is at fault. Now, if it's a dogma and it's totally not illegal, it's harmless, then it falls within the space of religion and belief. And we have freedom to believe whatever we wish, whatever dogmas we want, so long as they don't transgress across law and they don't offend or harm anybody else's well-being and they don't deny anybody human rights. So when you are faced with a dogma, you need to recognize that you will not understand it. I met a man once who was in um, an asylum, and he was convinced that he was Napoleon. Okay, so he believed this. He walked around with his arm across his chest and his hands tucked into his jacket. Now, that is an unreasonable dogma. He believed it, he wasn't willing to abandon it, and yet he believed it. But it didn't do any harm. And because it didn't do anybody else any harm, then fine, you try and make sure that their life is as comfortable as possible. But when you have a dogma which determinedly creates violence, then you need to recognize it not as a religion, not as a belief. You need to recognize it as an ideology which is based upon striking terror. So it is a terrorist dogma. And then you can deal with it. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's Abrahamic or whether it's Dharmic or whatever it is. The presence of a violent dogma can only be dealt with the use of force. Now, if I just pick up on the point that you made about madrasas, the best time to instill a dogma into a person is when they are young, when they're between the age of 3 to about 7.
Yes.
At that age, whatever an authority figure says to the child is accepted without scrutiny. They will believe it and it becomes part of their subconscious. It becomes part of their deep conditioning, and it's a dogma. And you can't dislodge a dogma by talking to people in that reasonable manner that we have. I'm sure you can recall only, I think it was last year, where we had an instance on London Bridge,
Yes.
where the person who was also an Islamist, he had a machete and attacked a number of innocent bystanders, and yet he was the subject of a Cambridge University rehabilitation program. and they thought they had managed to stabilize him and rid him of any deep conditioning, but they were unsuccessful with it.
Yeah.
So once we recognize the presence of a dogma, we don't need to worry about what it's called. It's just a dogma. And if
Yes.
it's a dogma, we can deal with it without having to struggle with the problems associated with tribalism or with religious tribalism or to do with religious ideologies. All of those can be put to one side. A dogma is a dogma and it needs to be dealt with as a dogma.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.